But even through that heartbreak, we came together. We knew we had a job to do politically. We had to unite and organize to get Joe and Kamala into the White House, and then put all of our energy into Georgia so we could take back the Senate. And we did it. And I just, I hope everybody just keeps reminding yourself, for all the work that you did, we actually made the impossible possible. So it's wonderful that we stuck together, throughout the last year. But we still have a lot of work to do with the 2022 elections coming up, and that includes the mayor of New York City. And the primary for that is actually only 4 months away on June 22nd. So because we're gluttons for punishment here in New York City, we decided, well, what's our next, what are we going to do? What are we going to focus on? We know we have to focus on midterms, but how are we going to choose who, we're going to support for mayor in New York City? And it kind of feels like, and people in New York City probably know this, that it feels like the presidential primary all over again, because there are a million people running. But what we did, Sheila, Tristan, and a bunch of our, Team Pete friends did, was kind of put these candidates in through the Pete filter. Meaning, who are the candidates that are going to shake out towards the top, who kind of support our shared values, which we know is rules of the road, and have the qualities and experience to meet the moment. And we have ranked choice voting for the first time in New York City, which is also very exciting. So, the evaluation is a little bit easier, I think, because we can choose more than one. But what was very clear when we went through this exercise is that one candidate actually stuck out, and for us, as being in the #1 ranked position, and that's Shaun Donovan. He's a native New Yorker. He was HUD Secretary under Obama. He jumped out at us because our city's in crisis. He's an expert in crisis management, and he also has a vision that's really inspiring. And then we learned that Brendan McPhillips joined as Shaun's campaign manager, and that sealed the deal for us. So
yeah, I'll pick it up from here, Lisa. Thanks for the warm welcome for everybody here. I will echo the sentiment that I'm so proud and excited to see so many familiar faces, and I'm so happy to see all of these new people as well. A stranger is just a friend you haven't met yet, right? So my name's Tristan. I'm one of the co-organizers of this event. And so we really took the looking through the Pete lens for this thing very seriously. My crew of nerds and I decided to do, I guess, sort of a Friday night TED Talk, where we looked at some of the top candidates in the mayoral campaign, and we decided to do a SWOT analysis on 7 or 8 of them. And we decided that Shaun Donovan really shook out near the top. And it was only the cherry on a very, very enticing cupcake that Brendan McPhillips came on as his campaign manager to sort of underscore what we had already determined for ourselves. So we're really excited to learn all about how he came to be here in New York City, because Lord knows it would take a lot to convince me to move for the 3rd time in less than 2 years, in the middle of winter for a 5-month gig. So I'm sure he's got some really enticing information to give us. And I'm sure that we can learn tons about him, because if there's somebody who knows how to win campaigns, it's him. So if there are any of you, outside of the local area who yourselves are supporting some of your local candidates in the upcoming cycle, and as well as in 2022 and of course 2024, time passes so quickly, is right around the corner as well. We know we have a lot of work ahead of us, and it's time that we learn from the best. So everybody take out your pens and your notebooks. It's my honor to introduce Brendan McPhillips, the winner of the Iowa caucuses, the winner of the Pennsylvania Biden campaign. I'm so excited. Brendan?
Hey, everybody. It's really cool to be with you all. This is just such an amazing group of people who I came to know by following Twitter while I was running the caucus out in Iowa, and seeing all these wild folks from across the country who were supporting Pete and what we were trying to do. And it was so inspiring to see the work that you all did and just the level of commitment that you put into somebody that you really believed in. And we definitely felt it on the ground in Iowa HQ. I can assure you the topic of the Pete Barnstormers was always something we were discussing and tracking, and especially while we were planning for the LJ, which was just a tremendous event. So let me begin by just saying thank you for helping us succeed in that endeavor, and making history together, electing the first openly gay candidate for president to get delegates, the first openly gay winner of the Iowa caucus. It was a really historic achievement, and it wasn't anything that I did alone. It was a team effort from the staff in South Bend all the way to the volunteers on the ground and across the country. And it was a really special group to be a part of, and you all played a tremendous role in that. And so I'm incredibly thankful for it. And, one of the best memories I have is definitely LJ night, seeing the sheer volume of supporters we had, most of whom were from Iowa, but some were from all over the country, who came in and like got tickets from other candidates because we were keeping ours so closely held, to do whatever they could to be in the building, and just seeing and feeling that excitement was really cool. So I don't know how you want to do this. I can just like go right into Q&A, or if there's any particular thing you want me to discuss, I'm happy to do that. It was certainly a wild year with 2020 beginning, well, for me in 2019 when I moved out to Iowa, and then a pandemic happening, our candidate dropping out, signing up to support Joe, and all the craziness that the general election ensued. So let me know where you'd like me to begin, and I'll just jump right in.
So I guess
Oh, go ahead, Chris.
let's begin at the beginning. How did you end up in campaigns overall? Just how did you start on this journey?
Sure. That's a good question. I I dropped out of community college 3 times because I just didn't know why I was going to school, and I was trying to figure out what to do with my life that would have meaning, as opposed to just earning a paycheck, which, to be sure, is like a privileged position to be in. But I was at the time working at my local grocery store, thankfully in like a good union job, making a decent wage, and was just trying to figure out like where to devote my energy and resources into something that I believed in. And that was during the time of the George W. Bush administration. And I was just, fed up with any number of things that were happening there with the Iraq War, people I knew in high school going off to fight in it. My union that I was a member of went on strike for a while, and there was a lockout at some of our competing markets, and it was just a really like intense couple of years that helped kind of crystallize a way of looking at the world in which I was constantly being shown examples of how regular people were being looked over and held back from any number of things. And so I just started reading up about politics and campaigns and history, and went back to community college so maybe I dropped out twice. So I think I went back for the 3rd time, and 3rd time was a charm, and just studied my tail off, and through a mix of hard work and luck, got accepted as a transfer student to Notre Dame, which is what took me to South Bend, where by chance I just met Pete when he came to speak to the college Democrats one day. And that's actually where I met Mike Schmuel, Pete's campaign manager, while I was interning at the local then Congressman Joe Donnelly, in his district office, while Mike was, I think, he wasn't like district director, but he had some kind of position in the community there. And we got to know each other a little bit. And then interestingly, like went down 2 separate paths, stayed in touch via email every year or so about, hey, what are you doing now? And years later, when I had progressed in my career a bit more, It was actually after 2016, and I was day drinking on inauguration day with some Hillary alums. And somebody mentioned, hey, Pete Buttigieg is running for DNC chair. And then I reached out to Shmuel and just wanted to help in any way that I could. So I helped on that DNC race for a month. And then Mike and I started talking a lot more frequently. And that's what led me to get into Iowa a couple years later. But to get back to the original point of the question, it was really just wanting to make a difference and being like in a position where I could do that, figuring out what I wanted to do at the time where I was going back to school and just kind of honing in on how to go down that road. And I've been fortunate to wind up on some really interesting campaigns that, this line of work is a little bit of luck and a little bit of being in the right place at the right time. But I've tried to always hold myself to a standard of really committed, like being committed to the candidate that I want to work for and not just taking a job because I think the candidate's going to win, but that it's somebody I really want to go and fight the good fight with and see what happens.
So I think you're being a tiny bit modest about the sort of being in the right place at the right time thing, because I don't think that's quite all of the magic. Because you didn't just go to Iowa. You guys won Iowa, right? With a candidate who was, 38 years old at the time and who had an unpronounceable last name and who was, an openly gay man living with, a husband and had no political visibility outside of the immediate area prior to 2019. That's a huge deal. What are some of the takeaways? What's some of the information that you can give us out of Iowa that we could use for campaigns beyond that? Because you've got something there.
Yeah, I mean, it helps to cook with the right ingredients. So you've got to have the right candidate for the right moment. And I definitely think that was Pete for Iowa and for the country at the time. I think a lot of crazy things happened with the way that the caucus results were tabulated that kind of shook up the dynamics of the race. But it starts with having the right candidate. And I think looking for when you're looking to support somebody, for me, it's very obviously I want to be ideologically aligned with the majority of, their platform. But nobody's going to agree 100% with every single thing that their candidate proposes most of the time. You're going to find some area of disagreement or maybe an issue that you're just not that informed about. So it's really about the person's character and motivations that I think is a separator between candidates that I think are just your average or maybe subpar versus the ones who are special and have, if not the opportunity to win, certainly move hearts and minds in a meaningful way in the process. And that's an important part about campaigns too. It's it's a conversation that you're having with, either your town, if you're talking about city council, or in some cases the country, like you were talking about during the primary. And that's where you can flesh out ideas and have important debates. And so, I mean, if you wanted to distill the secret sauce to winning Iowa, I mean, it was very much cooking with the right ingredients, having the candidate who was right at the moment. We had an extraordinary team of people, I mean, many of whom had never worked on a campaign before, but were drawn to what it meant to see a young millennial gay mayor of a small town run for president. And a lot of people on our team flocked to Pete because that represented something personally meaningful to them. And so we just had, as most campaigns do, just a large group of young, scrappy, hungry people who were willing to do what it took. And, we organized in creative ways. I know you're all big fans of the Pete organizing model and have had conversations with Greta about what they were trying to do with relational organizing. And we just we put together a good blend of tactics that were somewhat innovative and also very traditional. I think getting into the race in the way that Pete did, without a huge network of national support, without a history of campaigning in Iowa, we needed to build a volunteer army from scratch. And so the relational approach that we took to eschewing just the traditional okay, like log in the van and start calling and you'll find someone who likes you and then invite them to something. I mean, starting with that initial base of folks and really mining the personal networks and, you know, the book clubs and the PTA moms and like all of those folks allowed us to like level up super quick in terms of how we built our volunteer infrastructure. And that hit at the right time where Pete was blowing up by just demonstrating his like eloquence and passion and intellect on the national stage with some of his cable news hits. So it was very much like strapping our chair onto a rocket ship and trying to build the organization in the state at a speed that could match the incoming support. And that was a challenge. It took us a couple months to get into an office and stop working out of Smoky Row Coffee because we were just, you know, trying to hire so quickly and trying to do all the things to put together the infrastructure. But and then there's like traditional campaign stuff too. Like, you know, we had a finance team that did a great job fundraising that allowed us to hire the level of staff that we needed to go on TV earlier than a lot of candidates at the time were. And our strategy to persuade through caucus night and just shove all the chips into the center of the table on persuasion was really a huge reason why we found the success that we did. I think there were a lot of campaigns who were doing turnout for the caucus that really looked incredibly similar to the way you would turn out for a normal election, but a caucus is not an election. A caucus is a caucus. It's a meeting of folks like we're doing right now. And your job is to get your supporters there, but then also like convince those people in the room that they should be with your guy. And so our strategy of persuading like throughout the evening of caucus night is what sealed the deal. I mean, we were the only campaign that had the precinct level coverage that we did. I mean, we literally had a precinct captain in almost every single precinct in Iowa. I don't think we quite had 100% coverage, but we hit the 100% recruiting threshold. And then, you know, you always like have some people drop out at the last minute. But we were well covered and they were trained. You all saw, and some of you participated in the amazing trainings that Travis Brock led across the state on caucus math and what it's going to look like in the room. And it was incredible. Like we had a really great team that put together all those strategic components into, you know, the right order, and like it all builds the puzzle.
If anything, people got so good at the caucus math that we kind of got into a little bit of trouble because people on the national scene forgot that caucuses are very visible. So you can tell who voted for whom. So if you have a person in the room, you know what the results are if you're in there. I won't forget that memory. So just to keep this moving a little bit. So it seems like you like campaigns that require very interesting particulars, because you didn't just take a nap after Iowa, which is what I think 94% of us on this call would have done. You decided to take your little bag of knickknacks and head over to Pennsylvania to help Joe Biden, save us from fascism. And in Pennsylvania, of all places, though, you didn't decide to go to like an easy state. You decided to go to one of the toughest battleground states in the country. First of all, what would make you do that? Because that sounds exhausting. And second of all, what did you take from Iowa? What did you take from, you know, the DNC run? What did you take from your tool bag to help us get that win in Pennsylvania?
Yeah. So Philadelphia has actually been home for the last few years for me. I came out here in 2012 to be a regional organizing director for President Obama's reelect, and my turf was a county just north of Philadelphia called Bucks County. And then, like, just by chance, I got a job after the campaign that took me to Philadelphia, and I kind of stayed put and laid down some roots and managed some races here and have a fair amount of Pennsylvania experience. So even on Pete's campaign, after we won and as we were thinking about how the race was going to evolve, like my goal was always to go back to Pennsylvania, because I knew that Pennsylvania was going to be like the #1 battleground state in the general election. So Like I was telling people, don't you dare send me to headquarters. Like I don't want to move up and do some HQ job. Like I want to go run Pennsylvania because that's how we need to win. So I always wanted that. And I was just very fortunate that like the Biden team was gracious enough to reach out. And interestingly enough, they reached out right after Pete dropped out. And I had a conversation, but then that was like a few days before everyone really knew what COVID was becoming. And then it was just like hitting pause on everything. And as we were all adjusting to that new reality, like I had no idea if I would get hired on the campaign, like who knew how they were going to run things. And so a few months later, like finally things started up again. And I was fortunate enough to get the opportunity to do PA for the Biden team, and had a similar conversation with them. Like they asked what my interests were, and I was like, I want to be Pennsylvania state director. That's like, Pennsylvania is my state. I've got enough experience there. I'm hungry. Let's get it done. This is how we're going to win. And as far as like what I took to Pennsylvania, I stole some of our best staff. Sarah Goldstein was an amazing deputy organizing director in Iowa. We brought her over to Pennsylvania to lead the eastern half of the state, and a number of amazing organizers and digital folks and other people who came to join the cause as well, and a lot of people from our competitors in the primary. So we were one big family of folks who were all like in it to get the job done, despite having come from many different places. Like we would joke about it too, because like some of the people on the team were getting their asses handed to them by me in Iowa and by some of my colleagues in New Hampshire. And here we were, and like, they were the nominee now. So, they'd exchanged some good faith ribbing with us from time to time. But I think Pete and Joe have really similar like character and like a view of how to build and expand a coalition. And so I took that approach from Iowa that is really aligned with President Biden and I think his values too, which is, we've got to talk to everyone and we've got to persuade. Like this isn't about being the most polarizing candidate. We need to bring people into the party. And so one of the mantras in Iowa was that I would like tell reporters all the time is, we're going to win by campaigning everywhere and talking to everyone. Like that's it. We're going to go everywhere. You're going to see us more than you're going to see the other candidates. I think in the last 3 weeks of the caucus, we had 57 public events, which I don't know how Pete did it, but God bless him for letting me run him through that gauntlet. And so like we took that approach to PA. Obviously it was different. We weren't able to travel in person for a long time because of COVID. But we were doing a lot of creative virtual events. And then as soon as they flipped the switch and said, okay, the VP is going to be traveling again, we thought very intentionally about where we wanted to use that limited number of trips. And we were in a fortunate position too of, we're right by his home in Delaware. So it's easy to get up into southeastern PA. And so we were always going to get him more, both because of that and also because Pennsylvania was in like the top 3, in my opinion, the top 1 battleground that had to be won. And in 2016, like there was a lot of criticism about the Clinton campaign, ignoring certain parts of the state and where they traveled. And some of that's fair criticism, some of it's not. Like there were some constraints then too. I was on that team. I wasn't the state director, but to the part that was fair about it is like I was really straightforward with the headquarters staff that like we had to go to all these places. And so we went to places like Erie, which is only like a 6% share of the state's market, but means a lot to like send the next president there to a place and remind people in that broader area that, you're not forgotten, these places matter. And it was a really important message for the campaign that I think resonated in Pennsylvania and resonated in Iowa too, when we would barnstorm the state and show up in all these small towns that were not in major media markets. And we tried to do the same as we were able on a more scaled back version of that in Pennsylvania. Like our Amtrak tour, the capstone event was in Johnstown, Pennsylvania in Cambria County, where Hillary Clinton got 28% of the vote, I think, maybe 29. And I had a fun discussion with Biden HQ about why I thought we needed to do that. And to their credit, like they listened, and there was a healthy back and forth about the utility of doing that. But at the end of the day, we did. And the headline of the paper the next day was Joe Biden, I hear you. And like that is that's earned media gold, and it resonates beyond that community. So like that town may have 5,000 people in it. Johnstown's bigger than that, but for the point of the example, like it's beyond that, because that gets picked up across the state. People in the next market over see that that President Biden is concerned about going to places that are not Philadelphia and Pittsburgh. So we tried to do a little bit of everything. We would go to rural, often unvisited parts of the state. And we would also do a ton of events in Philadelphia and Pittsburgh too. We tried to take a kitchen sink approach to both our comms and our organizing, but also our principal travel, which is the same thing that we did in Iowa too, which is just kind of throw it all at them and see what sticks.
So Brendan, before we jump into the fishbowl, because we hope you're ready for this, but it's interesting hearing you talk about, your work in Iowa with Pete, who, was kind of criticized as having not a lot of experience, and then jumping over to Joe, who maybe was criticized as having too much, the most experience. But your plans and visions kind of worked in the same way, which is going out into the rural areas and basically making, that headline happen, which is we hear you, you're not forgotten. So before we go to the fishbowl, can you talk a little bit about how Shaun Donovan fits that model? Because, in his latest ad, he talks about how usually the change candidate is the one with the least experience, but he has the most experience. So he feels kind of like a combination of Pete and Joe in a very weird way.
Yeah, he is. And I think that you'll hear Shaun say over and over again that he wants to be a mayor for all New Yorkers. And his agenda is very progressive, but I think he has a way of articulating it and conveying his priorities, and like the experience of being in the Obama administration that is very traditional. Not traditional is not the right word. Not everybody gets to be a secretary in a president's cabinet, right? But his experience is unique, but he's not like an establishment candidate in the way that some people might want to typecast him, because when he does dive into his policies around homelessness and housing, they're really structured around equity through like every policy proposal that he's put out. The foundation has been like, how do we make this, or how do we leverage this policy in a way that ensures that we're addressing systemic inequity and racism? And that's one of the things that really drew me to him when we first spoke, and helped convince me to not take my nap and jump back into the fray again. Is like, he was very intentional, very bright and smart and thoughtful about what he's doing and why he's doing this. And that was really appealing in like very similar ways, like character-wise, to Biden and Pete. Shaun often talks about his previous management experience and making sure that on the campaign too, that there's a culture of kindness. And like, where does that sound familiar? Like the rules of the road that we had on Pete's campaign very much came from the candidate down. And that stuff matters to Shaun a lot. I think it's one of the reasons why we hit it off when we first spoke. Because you can do these big, important things and work on causes and really tough problems at very high stakes. But you can do them, by leading with kindness and by bringing everybody to the table, and, lifting people's voices up in the process. And so I think there's some interesting, not just policy similarities, but really like at the root of his character that makes Shaun a similar in profile candidate to a Pete or to President Biden.
Yeah. Yeah, when Tristan gave us her PowerPoint presentation and all of the candidates running for New York, I mean, that's where it kind of really jumped out to me that he met all of those criteria. And then Tristan actually told us the story about how Shaun's work actually, she felt the real life impact of that. Which I don't know, Tristan, if you want to tell it, for
Sure.
a
I
couple
got to
minutes.
do the Cliff Notes version though, because, I do want to get to all of you guys' questions. So just for some background, I'm a native New Yorker, born and raised. I grew up in the Bronx. I live in Williamsburg, Brooklyn now, but my family is actually from Denham Springs, Louisiana. So we have lots of roots down there. So when Hurricane Katrina hit, which was the weekend of before my freshman year of college, it was a really big deal for us, to sit and sort of watch that, and then have gas skyrocket $5 to $5 a gallon. The only time I ever need to drive anywhere, it was something that really hit me hard. And so when Hurricane Sandy happened in New York, it was already, sort of bound and determined to be a traumatic experience for me. But at the time, and still to this date, my brother, his wife, and his children lived out in the Rockaways, and they still live there. At the time, it was just him, his wife, and his 4-year-old daughter. She's now 13. We'd had Hurricane Irene the year before, if you remember, and it turned out to be nothing. So a lot of people, even though we had tons of warnings, didn't really expect it to be anything, because I don't think I remember having a superstorm in my lifetime. And I'm in my 30s. So we a lot of us didn't take it as seriously as necessarily we should have, now knowing what we know. So he sent his wife and his kid into the city to be not next to the ocean, and he thought he would watch the big waves roll in, he would watch the surfers, have a really great time with the storm. And then, the water started to rise in his apartment. And, by the time he returned to his apartment, anything that was less than 3 feet tall was completely soaked, covered in mold. It was completely unlivable. And, he, is still a fast food manager. He manages a Taco Bell right now. And he also, works in the catering suites at Citi Field. This is not a person who has a ton of money, and, he has children and family. So it's really hard for him to imagine trying to rebuild, with images of Sandy in the back of our mind. But within 21 days of, filing all of his, paperwork and all of the processing and stuff like that, he had a check in his hand, a 5-figure check to be able to get his life started again, which is why he remains in the Rockaways, because he was able to rebuild in the home that he built by the ocean for his kids and his wife. He was able to be part of the revitalization of that community. He lives right on Beach 90, which is right next to Rippers, right next to Talkaway, if anybody knows the area, right next to the line between the surf beach and the swim beach. It's just a beautiful place to raise a family. And he got to be part of that because of Shaun Donovan. So when presented with a choice, he's first on my ranked choice voting ballot by several miles, even though we have a really great slate of candidates. So I'm really honored to be able to support him tonight, and I hope I can bring you all along as well. And I know that Brendan probably can, so I'm going to flip it back over to him in the fishbowl.
Well, Tristan, thanks for sharing your story. I mean, you're definitely a more persuasive validator than I am as a professional political hack here. Like, this is why we do things, is to help real people. And that's really, and I know we got to spend some time talking about your brother's story a little more last week, but it's really powerful and inspiring and encouraging to hear somebody who's been personally helped by Shaun. So thank you.
Great. So I just want to jump in here where it's, want to get started on the fishbowl, but I just wanted to say that I first became aware of Shaun during the effort for the recovery after Superstorm Sandy, and so I have been kind of following him ever since, and I just am amazed that we have the opportunity to have a candidate with such experience lead us through what is a moment of big crisis in the city, and his skills and the crises that he has handled are so directly aligned with what we're about to be, what we are facing, what we're about to be facing. So that's sort of my 2 cents. And point of personal privilege, so I'm going to ask my question first before I go to the fishbowl, which I have a fishbowl of all your questions. But my question is, and I'm Sheila and I'm from New York. Many of the folks on this call met or got politically activated, possibly for the first time, because of the opportunity that the LJ dinner in Iowa offered to propel Pete to his victory there. And you already talked about kind of your favorite moments of that event. But what I want to know is, what are the parallels that you can draw to the importance of this moment in the New York mayoral race in terms of gaining traction in a compressed calendar with a crowded field, and the importance of breaking out?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, I mean, on the surface, the New York City mayoral race and the Iowa caucus could not be more different campaigns, in that, like, the Iowa caucus is all about retail. There's a lot of opportunity for, intimate engagement with people and in the candidates who are running, and there's also a lot of theater, and I mean that in the best way possible. Like, there are these big moments in the campaign over the course of the cycle that are sort of highlights, where candidates like rise up to them or they don't, and the LJ obviously being the big one. And then for the mayoral race, is the mayoral race in a pandemic, mind you. There's not so much the opportunity for that kind of mass scale retail involvement. I think, like, where you can draw a similarity about a moment to break out is really something that you have to be scrappy and try to find. And I think that, like, we went up on TV just last week, first candidate in the race to do that, to begin to tell Shaun's story. And I think that was a big moment in the race, certainly for us. And so people are just getting a first look at who Shaun is. That's super important. And to break out, we need to continue to have moments like that. We need to do things like this and put dozens of people together in rooms virtually, so that we're all being safe, and have these kinds of conversations, and employ some of the relational tactics that we did so well in Iowa. So if you're not from New York City, but you have friends or family that are New Yorkers, pick up the phone and give them a call and talk to them about Shaun, talk to them about the connections that you have to the campaign via your fellow Barnstormers or fellow New York Team Pete members. And the fact that you're on this Zoom right now, it's an awesome experience. And I think that, like, it's important not to, like, carbon copy every campaign that you do onto the next one. So, like, we're not going to employ 100% of the same tactics that we did in Iowa or in Pennsylvania into this. But I do think there's some interesting points of synergy between the races. For instance, like, just Shaun and his character and commitment to public service very much tracks with those two races. And I think some of the characteristics that people are looking for in the next mayor right now, I don't think people are looking for a celebrity or platitudes. Like, they're looking for someone who is a proven leader and someone who's managed through crisis before. And that's exactly who Shaun is. He's devoted his entire career to public service and has led the country through some big things. His work at HUD, among a number of things, one of the things that always sticks with me is the fact that they ended veteran homelessness in dozens of cities across the country. Like, didn't reduce it, but ended the problem in certain cities. There's so much more work to be done, but Shaun is very committed to confronting and, like, not accepting the premise of the question, like, how do you manage homelessness, or, like, what can you do, but saying very clearly, this is a solvable problem, and what it requires is expertise and the political will to take it head on and do things differently. And he has the experience to do that. So those are, I think I may have verged slightly off topic from your question, but
actually, what I was trying to tee up for you is that if he has really good fundraising numbers, it's going to launch him into the first tier. So we'll get to that, and we'll ask Lisa to drop in the chat
that is
a link to the
very
next
important.
event. I'm just, like, putting it out there. That's what we're getting at here, right?
Yeah, I'm going to put that link in the event. You guys from Team Pete I think we will be very appreciative of this one. So Here it comes.
No,
Okay.
thank you for that too. And like we want to make sure that everybody on the call has an opportunity to get engaged in the campaign, and certainly financial support is super important, especially because like we're not the front runner in this race. We're a scrappy underdog, and we're making a real gamble by putting a TV ad up 4 months before election day. So we do need to reach out to our networks, and I'm doing that myself. I'm calling friends and family in New York and asking them to pitch in a couple bucks and help us get across the finish line. So really appreciate that. If you're interested in Shaun, if you can do the same, it really means a lot.
Great.
The really incredible thing about living in New York, though, is we have public campaign financing. So if you're a local resident, the first $175 that you donate to the Donovan campaign, or anyone, but obviously this is the one we're supporting, is matched 6 to 1. So your $175 could turn into $1,225. So really, I mean, you're basically saving money.
Yeah, that's really
Who doesn't
awesome.
love a bargain?
It's a great leveler for candidates, so that you can run and be a viable candidate without having to have been an institutional New York City politician for decades. It's a really cool feature that New York's able to do. And I've never been a big donor to a political campaign before. I've like donated a couple $100 here and there. So the opportunity to like take your 175 and make it $1,200 through the public match is really cool.
Okay, great. I'm worried about the time here, so I'm trying to.
It's all right. I can hang around for a few extra minutes. If you want.
Okay. So Sarah from Quincy, Massachusetts, where do you draw your inspiration and energy from?
Oh, I mean, inspiration is easy. Energy is a whole other question. I mean, like I think I mentioned this. I've always been real particular about who I go to work for and making sure that not only do I believe in like the issues that they are championing, but that they are clearly a good person at their core. And in the race for the right reasons is, I think, one of the biggest ones. Like, why are you running? Is it because you just want to be an elected official? Is it, the next step on the ladder? For me, that answer needs to be pretty clear, that like you are there to solve a problem. And so I've always been inspired by the candidates that I've worked for, whether that's city council or mayor of New York City or president of the United States. I think that's just a really important thing, that if you're going to put this time and energy into, you need to do right on the front end, because it is a lot of work and exhausting, and you can't have the energy to do this well if you don't really believe in who and why you're doing it. The energy is another story. I feel like an old campaign veteran now, because this is really a young person's game, and I've been traveling the country doing this for a while, and it's exhausting. But I guess I get the energy from a lot of coffee. I quit Red Bull in the 2014 cycle because I want to live a little longer. That doesn't and like a really great support network. Like I had a campaign cycle a few years ago that was just really tough, and like it made me really appreciate having people in my life that like lift you up when it gets hard. And I got the hell out of Florida and went home and got married. So having good people around to help out is a big part of it. And so many of my friends and like extended like chosen family members are people that you meet in this experience, much like, I mean, many of you are friends now too. And so it's just it's a really cool way to expand your friend network. Great.
Okay, so this one came out of the bowl here. This is Lisa from Carlisle, Iowa. And Lisa, I recognize your name because I know that you had a book that just came out. So don't be shy and put the link to your book in the chat so people can buy it.
I saw that on Twitter today.
Yeah. Okay.
On the ground.
So Lisa from Iowa says, I'm considering making a run for office. I have little name recognition, no money. I don't have a fancy education, but what I do have is an amazing support system, a team that would like to see me succeed, and a common sense vision of how we could all be better as a community than what we are currently seeing. My question is this: Am I more effective to continue to be a grassroots volunteer and get the job done on the ground? Or do you think it's better for regular folks like me to throw our hats in the ring?
That's a great question. And Lisa, congrats on the book. I think I saw that on Twitter earlier today or maybe yesterday. That's really cool. I mean, I don't think it's an either or about is it better to be an activist or a candidate. They are two very different tracks for sure. I've actually worked for a really interesting candidate who, in my eyes, is still kind of both. Helen Gim in Philadelphia. She was an activist when I ran her city council campaign, and now she's on council, and I think does a great job of like keeping the spirit of like the activist base that elected her and like bringing them into city government and making big change while like keeping that community together. I think what I would think about on as like you're weighing the decision is like, again, like, why are you running? So like, that's a question I ask when I want to go work for someone. Like you should definitely ask yourself that. And it's a totally personal question. But like, I've told this to a few people wondering the same thing. Like you should run if you can be completely comfortable with losing and still feel like you made a difference in the process. Because the most likely outcome anytime you run for office is that you're going to lose, because there's so many factors that make it so challenging. And sometimes like 90% of a race is outside your control. But there's a lot of great things that you can accomplish by running. It's elevating an issue that you care about. It's building a network of people and supporters that maybe if you don't get over the finish line, become like a new family, a new friend network, and a new army around the causes that you champion during your race. So like, I can't answer that for you. It's definitely very personal, but I think that like, I would weigh like, what's going to make you happier in the process, like being the activist championing the issues that you care about, or like going and trying to make that change through the institutional system. And whatever you arrive at, I'm sure there would be a ton of awesome volunteers from the community that you met during Pete's campaign who would be more than thrilled to help you figure it out and help you take it on if you decide to go that route. So keep us posted with whatever you decide, and certainly wish you the best of luck.
Great. Okay, I have a few funny ones that I just can't ignore here. This one, I hope to God, is someone you know. Bill from Miami says, how did you get Jane to stay with you with that ridiculous hair?
I do know
So I
Bill.
hope you know Bill from Miami.
Bill from Miami.
Bill?
Is
Bill Hires.
is just giving me a hard time right now.
Okay. All right.
The guy. Jane prefers the wild hair. I'm not allowed to cut it.
Okay.
So this is my pandemic look. And when we're all vaccinated and I can go in public again, I'm taking the clippers to it real quick.
Great. Okay. And Annie from Philadelphia says, compliment instead. Excellent taste in candidates.
Yeah. More.
Sarah Lena, who I don't see on the call here.
Oh my God, is Sarah Lena on the call?
She was registered, but I don't see her. Perhaps she's being incognito. In all your years of working on campaigns, what has been the most Veep moment?
Oh. I mean, as Sarah Lena would know, we had a fair amount on the Iowa campaign trail, but we were all the Veep cast members in that one. Gosh, that's a great question. So for those of you who don't know, Sarah Lena was Mayor Pete's body woman. And that position is like someone who's just always like by the candidate's side and like running interference if there's like a crazy person coming up to chew the candidate's ear off for 2 hours, or like just making sure that he actually eats, and just keeping the trains running as we're bouncing around to 5 different cities in a day. So she sees all the craziness, and God, I might have to come back to this one. There's no doubt a ton of Veep moments, but they probably involved Max, who was our traveling ops person, and probably some hotel mishaps. I gotta let the gears turn a little bit and see if I can think of a funny one.
Okay. All right. All right. She gets demerits for not showing up anyway. We were so excited to see her sign up. Amy from New York says, I'm not a student and I haven't been for 20 years, so I'm often not the ideal candidate for internships on campaigns. How else can I learn on the job? Do you have advice for people interested in a mid-career switch to communications?
Well, I'm not a comms expert. I like having people like Ben from our Iowa team to talk to reporters for me so that I don't get nervous and say dumb things in front of them. But it's never too late to like make a switch and get involved. I mean, I think that you need to, think, again, think about why you're doing it, because it's certainly hard. And I don't know what you're currently doing, but if you're making a jump into campaigns from like a mid or higher level in your career, it's going to be a rough pay cut and a huge increase in hours. Yeah, I mean, interning on a campaign is something you can do at any age. You don't have to be a student. Lord knows, like, we'll have plenty of volunteer opportunities on our campaign, and every campaign does, that can exist in any number of departments. I think, like, trying to get into comms, you'll probably start out like doing research and like nothing glamorous, which I think like turns off a lot of folks, but it's like researching things and just putting together memos for the comm staff to sort through stuff that they've got to write and compile, because everything that you're doing on a campaign is like, the timeline is so compressed. Like a day's worth of work on a campaign is something that in the private sector, I think you'd have like 3 weeks to get done. And it's just it turned up a few notches. So it's tough, but if you're really interested in it, you can definitely find a way in. And I would just start by like looking at, and sometimes you get the best experience this way, but looking for like your local candidates wherever you are, and finding somebody you really care about and just figuring out how you can help them and going to work. Because some of the more interesting experiences you'll have will be by getting involved locally first. It's really hard to like jump on a presidential and a volunteer role and have like a meaningful role on a comms team, but it's a lot easier to do that and as like a city council candidate or even a congressional race wherever you're from.
Okay, great. So I'm conscious of the time, and so I think this is going to be the last question. AK from Chicago asks, how could I help New York City in the upcoming campaigns from outside? Great
question. Any number of ways. I mean, look at how we ran the presidential campaign in the general election. It was a pandemic, so we couldn't organize in person, at least not until like the final weeks. So we got really creative, doing Zoom events like this one, doing phone calls from anywhere in the country into Pennsylvania. And so in this case, like, you could help make phone calls to New Yorkers and tell them about why you're supporting Shaun. If you have friends or family, you should start with them and, pull out your relational skill sets and talk to people who you have a personal connection with about, why you're interested in Shaun and how you got connected through this exciting bunch of folks who are all connected from all these different campaigns now. And certainly helping to contribute financially is a really big deal. We are participating in the public matching funds, as Tristan mentioned, and it's a really cool opportunity that allows candidates to compete and make small dollars have an even larger impact. So again, like, whatever you can contribute is fantastic, but up to $175 is matched 6 to 1. So, $175 donation tonight is actually like donating $1,200 to the campaign, and just helping us organize and talk to voters, and also helping us raise funds to stay on TV are two really important ways that you could help out from anywhere that you are.
Great. Great. All right. So I think I'm handing it over to you, Lisa.
Okay. Well, yeah, I mean, we're a little bit past our hours. So, Brendan, we're going to open it up after this to kind of hang out, anybody who wants to stay to kind of reconnect if we haven't talked to each other in a while. But you're welcome to stay, or you probably have a million things to do for Shaun's campaign. But any kind of parting words to the folks.
And while you're talking, Lisa, be sure to drop the event, the Shaun event in the chat so that people.
It's already in there, but I'm going to drop it again. Just
yeah. Okay.
It's that cool.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah, so we're doing another event with Shaun instead of me this time, and you should all definitely get to meet him. A really great guy, and just a lot of really brilliant ideas for how to turn things around in the city. So hope you can come. And I guess for closing words, just wanted to say thank you to everybody for inviting me to do this. I got a fair bit of funny comments from some coworkers about how I'm doing a fundraiser instead of Shaun, but really, like, this is about reconnecting with old friends and supporters from such an incredible experience in my life. And I know for many of you, you were brought into politics either for the first time or maybe after a long hiatus because of something that inspired you to get involved in the caucus for Pete. And thank you for making that experience a success for Pete, for me, for our whole Iowa team. It was really, really special, and I'm just honored to be a part of this group and to see right here, how those kinds of relationships just extend, throughout the country, and how important it is to stay connected and continue fighting for causes that we believe in, especially while, we're going through a time as a country where we don't always feel that connection. I think as we're, struggling with the pandemic and assaults on democracy and trying to make sense of it all, it's really powerful to be able to come together like this and work towards a better day. So thank you for doing your part. It's inspiring to me, and I hope you all get a chance to meet Shaun, and would love to have your support on the campaign.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much, Brendan. This was really special for everybody. You can go back and tell your coworkers it was very special for everybody here. So, but yeah, we really appreciate it. So, just to reiterate, relational is what Team Pete knows. And so talk to your friends and family in New York City, and come to the fundraiser next Tuesday with Jordan Roth and Shaun talking together about vision and how we're going to get out of our crisis. So, so we're going to open it up now, for anybody who wants to.
Lisa, I thought I would just, if people are, hopefully people who want to will stay, but I thought I would just play that 30-second new TV ad just so people can see it and get organized or get a drink or something. But
yeah, this is the time to switch from seltzer to vodka seltzer.
That's right. That's right.
The after party, right?
This is the after party. But anyway, to kick it off, hopefully this works.
When I took office, few had a tougher job than Shaun Donovan. Shaun's just one of those people where he sees a problem and he will work to solve it.
I represent real change, but the change candidate usually has the least experience. I actually have the most. I've been on the front lines in moments of crisis in this city like nobody else has. We need a mayor who can roll up their sleeves and get to work to rebuild better and stronger and safer.
Paid for by New Yorkers for Donovan.
Yay. So I think that while we were on this call, you all probably got an email with information about the event and links of stuff to check out. So hopefully we will see many of you, all of you, on the next event next week with Shaun. We're really looking forward to it and trying to make a big punch impact in our entry involvement in this race.